This is a video I've wanted to film for so long. This is a video I've needed to film for so long because it's my final project. We have all of these notes that I'm going over with you because this is a deep dive into Taylor Swift's All Too Well short film. Also, there's a car right there. Just ignore them, okay? I have this class called Mediated Communication, and for my final project, I was assigned to analyze a piece of media using what we've learned in class this year and make a video about it. And I was like, perfect, this is the best final project ever. So I'm doing what I know best, and that is Taylor Swift. She just handed me the perfect piece of media for me to do this project on, and that was her short film for the 10-minute version of All Too Well. This short film is incredible. It's so well done. Sadie Sink and Dylan O'Brien, fantastic in it. Like, literally made me sob. I'm gonna put the clips in here of me sobbing after I watched it. The music video, the short film is so good. I can't believe how hard I'm crying. It's so good. Now I'm supposed to go to basketball and I'm all crying and stuff. Oh. Good luck, girlies. I cannot believe how emotional that made me. I'm like crying so hard right now. I hate Jake Gyllenhaal! So let's begin. I'm gonna talk about like two main points, and one point I'm going to be talking about is the lighting and the colors and how they are used strategically throughout the film. And then I'm going to be talking about how the story is told and the timing of it and everything. I'm gonna start with the timing. So the timing of this film is kind of told in chapters. She even has like headings on each new like section of the film. It's kind of like a book, which it will play into a different piece of the film later. It makes a lot of sense for her to do it like that because there was a lot of different emotions that she felt during this relationship, I'm assuming. We start out with what I'm gonna call the prologue. It starts during the relationship. We don't see how these two people get together, how they ended up dating. We don't see the progression of their relationship because the beginning honestly doesn't really matter. We just see a happy couple. They're just doing a bunch of things together, having a good experience, laughing in the car, things like that. Having the happy scenes in there make the sad scenes way more impactful. Like, we feel like we are invested in the relationship by the time they're breaking up because the beginning is so happy, it's good. They're like driving and they're in the car and they're like laughing and smiling at each other in the car. They're sharing headphones. They're making out on the road when the camera's like swirling around them. You feel like you're in the moment with them. We get about 2 minutes of the happy things before it starts to get bad, and we get to chapter 1, which she calls the first crack in the glass. The bad things in the video line up with the lyrics as they get more sad. The first like really bad scene happens when she says, "And you were tossing me the car keys, F the patriarchy, keychain on the ground." This is starting to be a really stressful relationship, and this man is giving this girl so much turmoil emotionally, and it starts right when the first like heartbreak lyrics start. So we see it at the same time that we hear it. Then we have a break in the music and there's a dialogue scene. They are arguing while she's doing the dishes. This argument could have been about anything. It doesn't really matter what the argument is about. I think the most important part of it is how he's speaking to her and the way he reacts to the things she says. I think this argument gives us insight into how most of their arguments probably went. It showcases like the manipulation that she experienced and just makes you really start to not like this guy. Then the music comes back on and the first lyric we hear again is "And I know it's long gone," which is very symbolic of how it was already over before they even broke up. Then we go into the next chapter, which is "Are You Real?" which ties back into the very first line that the girl speaks. I think the words "Are you real?" sum up the feeling of unpredictability and like anxiety that comes with an unstable relationship, because this entire chapter, all of the moments in the chapter were happy. They were dancing in the kitchen and like playing games, kissing by the fire, whatever. It only lasts 1 minute. This is a 15-minute film. I think that was very strategic because it shows that since the first crack in the glass, they have not had much good time left before the next chapter, which is the breaking point. This chapter comes so suddenly after all of the good things we see in the Are You Real chapter. We get the same kind of whiplash that the girl in the film gets from her boyfriend. It's so good and then all of a sudden it's not. And you're like, wait, it's just over like that? It does a great job at pulling on your heartstrings. This chapter shows every part of a fresh breakup. Like, it actually shows them breaking up, and then it shows her crying in her bed. It shows her looking around a crowded room and just being alone even though there's so many people surrounding her. Then we see a great use of tense when she's sitting at the table talking to her dad and her boyfriend, and she's just enjoying watching them interact with each other, and then boom, she's sitting in the same seat at the table, but all of a sudden it's her friends surrounding her. She's visibly less happy. She's still smiling, but you can tell it's not as genuine. It's a very good transition to be like, this just switched so fast. She's sitting in the same seat, but everything has changed. Then we go into the reeling, where she's crying, processing it all. This is the shortest chapter, but I think that is because the next chapter is the remembering. And they go hand in hand because I think remembering is a huge part of reeling. And I think that's why the reeling chapter was so short. Remembering is full of flashbacks. It's little clips of what we already saw earlier in the film of all the good things. And then we get the flashbacks of the bad things too. All of the good times that we see are in natural lighting, and all of the bad times that we see are in artificial lighting. So they're like inside, they're on a street where it's dark outside, but they are street lights. That's all the bad things. The very last chapter is 13 Years Gone, and this whole chapter is symbolism, the whole thing, which is so much of the reason why it made me sob so hard. In 13 Years Gone, we see Taylor Swift herself playing the older version of the girl we've been watching the whole time. And she is the author of a debut novel, and the novel is called All Too Well. She turns off the light, she goes out, and she's reading the book that she wrote to the listeners, and then the camera pans away from Taylor and to the listeners. This broke me down. You can see the tears on the faces of the people who are listening, and this is so symbolic. So obviously the book represents the song. The crying listeners are such an important part of this scene. Honestly, she could have made this scene a scene of her playing the song to a crowd of fans, singing the words with her and crying with her. But the significance of it being a book reading instead is that after all of these years, she's finally trusted us with the most heartbreaking lyrics of her career. She has given us the complete story. She knew we were gonna cry to it with her. She knew we were gonna love it. She knew we were gonna accept the lyrics the way that we have. 10 years ago, the complete story was way harder for her to tell. If you're not familiar with the first song already, let me just say that the added lyrics to make it the 10 minutes that it is instead of the original 5 are so much more vulnerable and emotional, and they cut so much deeper. So I really do think that it took a lot of trust for her to put this out and have people be like, yeah, I feel for you, instead of being like, wow, you're dramatic. Because 10 years ago, they might have. People see Taylor Swift in a brand new light these days. Then finally, we pan out, and there's a man, and he's wearing the scarf, and it's snowing. Inside, we have Taylor reading her book in warm lighting. It looks nice and cozy in there. He's outside in the cold, watching through a window. This just matches up with the lighting symbolism so well, and the snow is so genius. Snow is just such a good way to represent like the change of season, and the change of season is such a good way to represent how she's just in a different stage of her life than she was when this was happening. The fact that he's watching through a window is very telling that he just has his own perspective on it, but he kind of just has to watch from outside because Taylor and her fans are so connected that we are more in the loop than he is, I think. Like, he doesn't have anything to do with it anymore. Now, speaking of lighting, this was pointed out in a tweet by another fan, but I took this concept that they had and I just went so much deeper into it. The thing that they said was that, oh look, when they're dancing in the kitchen, we've got the cold blue light coming from the fridge where he's standing, and we've got the warm yellow light coming from the sun through the window where she is. This person was like, that represents like her warmth and innocence and stuff, and his like coldness. So I was like, oh, that is super interesting. And I watched the film through that lens, and she does not only do that in that scene, she does that throughout the entire film. And she uses the colors yellow and blue to symbolize when he's in her life and when he's not. When they're in the car and when they're at his sister's house, at the beginning, everything is like natural warm lighting, but then in the first crack in the glass, when they're fighting in the kitchen, that lighting is not natural at all. It's like cold blue artificial light, and this is like the first time that we see like his dark side and when things are bad between them. From that point on, there is a combination of both blue and yellow used in every scene. After his like apology in that chapter, they're in the kitchen, and that's when there's still the cold blue refrigerator light, but there's also the warm sun coming through the window, being like, okay, this is kind of okay now, but it's not the way it was before. The color blue is used in a lot of his scenes. In the bedroom scene, when they're like laying in his bed, they're doing the crossword, they're like just having a nice little time together. The pen is blue, the sheets are blue, and the walls are blue, all different shades of blue. In what we assume to be her house and her room, she's got like strung up lights, white walls, brown sheets, or I think like it's all like earthy and like warm and cozy. In the breakup scene, we have that artificial yellow light, but all the shadows look very blue. When she's alone, the lights are always yellow. Even the drinks at the party where she's alone are yellow, because that's her color, that's what it represents. When he's not there, there's no blue light anywhere. Even if she's sad, there's no blue, because he's not part of her life. There's not gonna be blue light because the blue light symbolizes his presence in her life, except for at her birthday party when the cake is blue. Using context clues and lyrics from other songs in the album, we know this boy did not show up to her birthday party. And so I think the symbolism in the blue cake is basically just a painful reminder that he's not there. She's like, oh, blue, that reminds me of him. He's not here. That sucks. Then for a minute in the reeling, it's just very neutral, like white, boring light coming through the windows. Like, it's very colorless. There's a lyric in the song later that says, I'd like to be my old self again, but I'm still trying to find it. I think that lyric and the fact that there's a period of time where there's no yellow or blue light is very representative of her not remembering her roots and her original personality before she knew this guy. When the remembering chapter comes on, we see the man walking down the street at night, and one side is lit with like warm yellow lights and one side is lit with blue. And I think that's very interesting because he's remembering when they were together, and then that's like the first time in a while that we see the colors yellow and blue used in the same shot. During the outro, the first time we see Taylor 13 years later, the lights are actually red, and I think that's representative of her new version of herself that she's had to create in the aftermath of this traumatic breakup that she experienced. But there's still like traces of blue and yellow light everywhere. When she's doing her book reading, the light is very yellow. The book, however, is blue. There will always be traces of him in this story. She can't take him out of the story, otherwise it wouldn't be the story that it is. So the use of lighting is so good, so well thought out throughout this entire film. I could talk about this film for hours and I've already made this video way longer than it needs to be. There's just so much to say about it though. But that is my deep dive analysis and my comments on the All Too Well short film. Time for me to go home and edit this. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in another video. Okay, bye!
Up on the housetop, reindeer paws, out jumps good old Santa Claus.